Welcome to our digital worship. So, I want to talk spiritually. I actually love talking about spiritual things. Now, the most basic spiritual claim is that there is a non-physical realm. There's more to reality than we can see or understand. That's the most basic spiritual claim. And I always thought that it was sort of opposed to what science was saying, because I always thought science says all of reality is just matter, physical things, particles. But do you know, it seems like the tide is turning. If you pay attention to science these days and thinkers and intellectuals, it looks like everything is shifting. They're suddenly realizing that we don't directly experience matter at all, and they're not even sure what matter is. It seems like everything's moving towards being more open to a non-physical realm. Let me explain how this is starting to happen. So first, scientists and thinkers are realizing we don't directly experience even the fact that there is a physical realm. Let me describe this. Now, you might imagine that your eyes are windows to the outer world. So what do you mean I don't directly experience? I'm looking at a physical world. I'm staring at a physical camera right now. But your eyes aren't a window to the world. You know how vision works. Light hits photoreceptors in your eye, your retina. You know this. It's turned into an electrical signal. Your eye's not a window. It gathers your photoreceptors gather the light, turn it into an electric signal, then it travels along an optic nerve and goes to a particular part of your brain, the visual cortex. So your brain is sitting in a dark room. Your eyes aren't windows letting light in. An electrical signal goes to your brain, then your brain constructs an image. So you know all this, but we have to remember we're not directly looking at the physical realm. And then also the way your brain constructs an image, it's doing a particular way of seeing the physical world so that you can navigate it. I know you know all this. What's out there in the world isn't exactly how your brain constructs it. If you saw what the world was really, you would be overwhelmed with too much information. So like when you see a wall, well, you know in reality the wall is mostly space, and that it's subatomic particles creating basically a wave field. But if you saw all of reality in its fullness and complexity, you wouldn't be able to move. So your brain creates a simplified version of the physical realm through which you can navigate and survive. We know all this, but we just started to get a greater sense that no one has any direct experience of a physical world at all. Then, lately, the science has been showing that we don't even know what electrons are. We don't know what matter is in any way. Science and physics are describing what things do, not what they are. Now, that old model of an atom, like a sun with electrons orbiting it, they know that's just a ridiculous metaphor, that even the smallest particles are like a wave field or wave function, probability functions that manifest in various ways. But they're realizing they can't even describe what matter is. So more and more thinkers are starting to imagine the only one thing we know for sure is consciousness. That all of science you experience through your consciousness, everything you experience through your consciousness, and they're beginning to wonder, is consciousness primary to reality itself? This is really fun to watch, these thinkers and scholars and scientists beginning to question, could it be consciousness that's the most fundamental property of our universe? Okay, right there. I took a long time getting here. It's starting to sound spiritual, because the key essential claim of Christianity is that love is the essential aspect of reality. But love can only happen in consciousness. So now, spirituality and science are starting to come closer and closer, because love can only happen in consciousness. And when Christians say love is the essential aspect of the universe, we must be saying that God's consciousness is what's holding all reality together, because God is love. And suddenly, what if Christians end up having the most accurate sense of reality itself. That all reality is within the mind of God, the consciousness of God, and it's love that connects all things. I know I'm taking a long time to explain this. I just want to give you this sense that the spiritual might be the most real. Okay, let's go to an anthem by our choir that is so spiritual. Come Thou Fount. And the opening line, tune my heart to thy grace. Listen to this anthem as it slowly builds to a beauty, to a majesty. Listen. Isn't that choral anthem awesome? It ends with such majesty. Let's go from majesty to majesty. We're in Micah chapter 6. This is one of the key scriptures.
Let us listen. With what shall I come before the Lord and bow myself before God on high? Shall I come before him with burnt offerings, with calves a year old? Oh, will the Lord be pleased with thousands of rams, with 10,000s of rivers of oil? Shall I give my firstborn for my transgression, the fruit of my body for the sin of my soul? He has told you, O mortal, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you but to do justice and to love kindness and to walk humbly with your God?
I love how the ancient Hebrew prophets could be so critical about religion. You know, they thought it could degrade into just mindless ritual rather than focusing on what really matters, like serving the poor.
Yeah, you know what? It's good to critique. It's good to assess. It's good to stop. Sometimes we get nervous about it, but it's important for us to ask ourselves, are we doing what God's called us to do? Is this it? Because that invites the Spirit into what I believe is a hopeful imagination, a holy imagination. We opening our ears to what God might be telling us now. If we do not critique, we don't open ourselves up to that.
Yeah, you know, actually the Gospels themselves are pretty critical of organized religion, at least the figures like the Pharisees and the priests, and it looks like Jesus is in some tension. I think we should be in some tension with organized religion.
Constantly in a tension. I mean, in some ways, every time we gather together, there is a natural tension with so-called organized religion, but then we have an invitation by God's self to get beyond the tension.
Awesome. Hey, listen, I got to preach right now.
I'll let you go.
Okay,
go
take
ahead.
off. So, it is appropriate to be critical of organized religion. If you ask people today, they might say that institutional religion can become hypocritical or mean-spirited towards gay people, or become overly dogmatic, overly literal. There's lots of critiques. But I wanted to tell you today about something that emerged from institutional religion, that actually emerged from when our religion was part of empire, the Roman Empire, something that came about that was so gentle and wise. It was a doctrine. It still blows my mind that the institutional power structure developed a doctrine that is so soft and symbolic. Let me explain this to you. In the year 520, the Roman Emperor Marcion called together a council of 520 bishops, and there had been a problem. Everyone was arguing about Jesus. Some Christians, they were called the Ebionites, they thought Jesus was just human. And that's how they were following Jesus. He's just a great moral teacher and human being. Then there were other Christians called the Docetists. I know that there's all these weird ancient names, the Ebionites and the Docetists, but the Docetists thought that Jesus was just God in a costume, that Jesus was pure God, not human. And so the emperor thought, we got to figure out who Jesus is if Christianity is the official religion of the empire. So he calls these bishops together. They spend a month praying and studying and arguing. And then they issued a doctrine that is still the key teaching of the church about Jesus. So is Jesus human or divine? This is the doctrine. It says that Jesus is fully human and fully divine. So the institutional church gave us this paradox and said, if you're going to be a faithful Christian, you have to live in that tension and not come to easy answers. You would think institutional religion would want easy answers, right? Easy, literal answers. It's exactly what the great institution didn't give us. It gave us a mystery. Jesus is fully human and fully divine. That's a contradiction. What is a mind supposed to do with a contradiction? I think we're supposed to realize in some way the faith is beyond our comprehension, beyond our ken. That to have faith in Christ is to be drawn towards a mystery, not that you could grasp everything Christ is about. Can you believe the institutional church came up with that sort of gentle wisdom? I think there's a key effect of that too. People that are creativity experts will tell you, if you don't rush to an easy answer, if you stay in the tension of a difficult question, you'll be ever more creative. That's what the church is having us do in regards to Jesus. Stay in the paradox. Don't reduce him to a simple answer. And then we'll have so many creative ways we can follow him. I also love that the institutional church chose a both and instead of an either or. And if you're always setting up either ors in your life, black and white issues, it doesn't go well for us when we do that. But if we understand both and, that our answers and solutions should always involve multiple perspectives. I love that the organized church came up with that beautiful doctrine. So, if Jesus is fully human and fully divine, you can fully explore each side of that. For just a moment now, I want to tell you about how I explored the fully human side of Jesus. In the 1980s, I became excited about historical Jesus studies. Historical Jesus studies emerged post-Enlightenment when historiography was developed. And so with historical sciences being developed, we thought, hey, we can explore who Jesus really was in history. Who was Jesus really? And I got super excited by that. I ended up focusing on that in my schooling. And I wanted to just tell you that if you study the historical reconstructions of Jesus, it's pretty edgy stuff. Sometimes the church domesticates what he's about. But if you study the historical reconstructions, for example, if they try to place him in his social context and social milieu, historians realize the first thing we know for sure historically is that he was executed by the Romans as a rebel. Now I know we think of just the kind, easygoing Jesus, but the one thing we know historically for sure is that he was executed as a rebel to the empire. And so some historians begin to explore this and flesh out that he was poor, he was part of an oppressed group in the empire, and he started to be a rabble rouser, maybe even create a people's movement against the powers that be. This can be pretty radical stuff. Historians think that the urban elites were hoarding resources and that the poor were under heavy taxation. This is almost like a tax revolt that's taking place in the Gospels. This sounds a little radical. But sometimes I think we tame Jesus too much. Jesus, the human Jesus, should always be seen as opposed to the status quo. He wanted transformation. He wanted justice. But on the other side of this, I love the historical Jesus studies. There are some historians that focus on his spiritual role he played. So historians will look at other cultures and other times, the spiritual people in those, like medicine men for the Native Americans or shamans, and they see that Jesus actually fits a Jewish role of the time of what's called a spirit person, someone that's so connected to the spiritual realm that they can help bring others into that spiritual experience. There were a group of those spiritual leaders in first century Palestine called the Hasid, and they would go around and do miracles and bring people into spiritual experiences because they were so connected to that divine world. And they would also do ethical teachings and such. So some historians think he perfectly fits that role of almost the medicine man or the shaman who brings people into relationship with the spiritual realm. So, both in terms of social justice and spirituality, he's more radical than you think. So what's the point of this? Well, in the largest sense, don't tame your Jesus. Let him stand as a vision of how we should try to make a more just world. Let him stand as a vision that there is a spiritual realm and you can become connected to it. let's move to the benediction, because also what Jesus is about is connecting us to God. And there is a benediction that says very plaintively, let us love God more dearly and see God more clearly. It's called Day by Day. Let's end with this short benediction by our choir.